I get letters in the mail, which have no return address, and I get emails, which aren't signed. When I first got back, my mom got a letter in the mail stating that the person wished that my mom would go down to North Carolina, and if I decided to blow my head off, that she should help me. That just really scared me because, I mean, people could come out and want to try and kill me just because of a few pictures. So.
Lynndie England was 17 when she joined the army as a reservist, a weekend soldier. Like so many American servicemen and women from modest backgrounds, she signed up to get an education. She ended up being deployed in Iraq for a war that President Bush had already declared to be a mission accomplished.
Major combat operations in Iraq have ended. In the Battle of Iraq, the United States and our allies have prevailed.
Lynndie England arrived in Iraq in June 2003 and was assigned to the Abu Ghraib prison in September. There, late at night, over a period of 3 months, she and other soldiers systematically degraded and abused prisoners. They filmed what they did.
I shared a deep disgust that those prisoners were treated the way they were treated.
I feel terrible about what happened to these Iraqi detainees.
I'm truly outraged and repulsed at these reports of the conduct of the American servicemen.
And it made us sick to our stomachs.
Lynndie England faces a hearing and possible court-martial on charges carrying 16 and a half years in prison. Why did a young soldier like her take part in the sadistic behavior at Abu Ghraib? Her hometown is Fort Ashby in West Virginia.
It was a good place to grow up. It's on the eastern coast of the United States. It's called the Mountain State, so we live in a lot of mountains and high altitudes. It's not real big. It's got one stoplight. I mean, I love it, so I hope the people there still love me.
She's quiet. Quiet. When she had something to say, she'd tell you. She's very giving, considerate. She'd do anything for you.
A deserted trailer park in North Carolina. Here, Lynndie England is preparing for her Article 32 hearing, which will decide whether she faces a court-martial.
Lynndie is somebody that as a kid, if she was a classmate in your school, you'd call her a follower.
Xavier Amador is a clinical psychologist at Columbia University. He interviewed Lynndie for over 30 hours to determine her mental state.
She's somebody who doesn't ask questions. She's somebody who wants to please. And frankly, because she's limited in many ways intellectually, I'm not saying she's mentally retarded, but there are problems. There's major learning disabilities throughout her lifetime. She's learned to really trust people, and oftentimes the wrong people. So she's that kid that I knew when I was in school who would, if they got involved with the wrong people, end up doing bad things.
This is where we played ball. My sister played baseball here when she was like in kindergarten, first grade. She played here with my brother on a team. She wanted first to see the world, which she thought would be a great opportunity to go there, and then eventually have the money to go to college so that way she could do her dream, which was to be a storm chaser. She wanted to chase tornadoes. That was her big thing.
My immediate family, my mom, my dad. I have one older sister and one younger brother. And they all live there. As you know, I joined the Army my junior year, so I was 17 when I signed. And I went to basic training the summer between my junior and senior year.
I had a hard time signing. I didn't want to sign. My husband had already signed, and I didn't. And it took him a while to talk me into it. I mean, I wasn't ready for her to do this.
You know, Lynndie was somebody who grew up very, very poor, who saw the military as one way out of the poverty that her family was in. She's somebody who also saw violence in the household. The reports that I have indicate that her father was violent, that he hit at least one of his children. And so growing up in that environment, any child is going to have a hard time understanding what is and what isn't abusive.
Probably when I was 13, 14, somewhere around there. I just got really interested in the weather, lightning, thunder, storms, stuff like that. I mean, I'd stand out in a lightning storm. My mom would really get mad at me, but it's just the excitement, you know, of not knowing, I guess, how it's going to turn and stuff. And, you know, the fear of the lightning, but, you know, in my head, I knew what to look for if it was going to strike. And, you know, it was just, I loved to look the clouds, the storms. I can't really describe it. It's filling.
And now you're in one.
Yeah. Big storm.
In June 2003, Lynndie England crossed the border from Kuwait into Iraq in a convoy of the 372nd Military Police Company.
I remember when I first got there was the smell. I mean, it was just like a combination of gasoline, diesel, smoke, tar. I mean, it was horrible. And then you seen like little kids wanting food and water or candy from you. And, you know, we couldn't give them anything. But, I mean, it was really sad.
In September, Lynndie arrived at Abu Ghraib prison near Baghdad. She was assigned to the administration officers, logging prisoners in and out.
At the end of September, we found out that we were going to the prison. I'd never really seen a prison before, but I didn't think it was going to be as big as this place. It was huge. The general tiers were very packed. I think at the time there was probably about 5,000. Our capacity was 5,000. So I know we definitely went over that limit.
Every time she had called, due to mortaring in the background, which I could hear, the lines went dead. And that was enough to drive me crazy.
So she called you and you
She called and was trying to tell me, and the lines went dead. But
you could hear?
I could hear mortaring in the background, oh yeah. And it just terrified me. I mean, I could hear her shooting. And I thought, where are you calling me from?
There are 2 maximum security cell blocks in Abu Ghraib prison. Specialist Charles Grainer Jr. was posted there as a prison guard. The Pentagon sees him as the ringleader of the prisoner abuse at Abu Ghraib.
At the time, he was 35. He's now 36. He's a really good guy. He's responsible. He's very trustworthy.
With Mr. Womack on Monday, I'm sure.
You know, it's not just saying it because this storm we're in, but, you know, in a civilian life, you know, if you wanted something done, you could do it.
Did you fall in love with him?
Yes.
Reserve Brigadier General Janice Karpinski was in charge of 17 prisons in Iraq. One of them was Abu Ghraib. She was the only female commander in the war zone, in charge of 3,400 Army reservists, who, like her, had no training in handling prisoners. General Karpinski was suspended by the Pentagon immediately after the scandal broke.
Cell Block 1A and 1B were the only maximum security cells and isolation cells in all of Iraq. Lynndie England really had no responsibility in that part of the prison. And she was over at Cell Block 1A without any kind of official authorization or any purpose. She went over there because Greener was working on the shift. And
her lover.
Yes.
During our relationship, of course, other couples in the unit, we would all hang out and watch movies together. So, everybody knew.
Was it allowed?
No, it wasn't allowed, but there was a lot of other people in the unit that were couples.
She was late for work, she didn't show up for work, and because she continued to see Grainer, contrary to what the first sergeant instructed her to do.
How did her superiors find out?
I think it was pretty obvious from all reports. She was sometimes sleeping in Grainer's bed, and if she was late for work, they'd go over to Grainer and find her there, those kind of things.
In our unit, we were such a tight family, hey.
Order and discipline seemed to have dissolved in Abu Ghraib. One night in October, Lynndie walked over to see Charles Grainer in cell block 1 Alpha.
When I got over there, it was just Grainer and Megan up there. And they had a prisoner nicknamed Gus in the isolation cell. It was just a nickname that I guess Grainer or somebody gave to him, I don't know. But when I went upstairs to the office, I had been there, I don't know how long, it wasn't that long, and he had to bring Gus out and take him to his own cell, which was in 1 Bravo. The isolation cell was in 1 Alpha. When he went down and tried to get him out, he wasn't being cooperative. So he asked me for my help, and I agreed. You always help a buddy out, right? They ask. So I went downstairs with him, and he had a tie-down, whatever you want to call it, and he had put it around Gus's neck and asked me to hold it. So I held it, and he took pictures. And the reason behind it, from what I understood, was to intimidate him. Hey, I'm a short little female that has you on a leash, and I'm telling you to move or I will move you. And, it was a whole intimidation tactic. It was a mind game. And it made him feel humiliated and embarrassed, of course. And it did. Initially, he did get up and go to his cell.
She looked completely disinterested in this picture. I recall that very vividly, that she looked like somebody had this idea and took this dog leash and put it in her hand and said, "Stand there, let me take this picture."
What's special about November 8th?
It's my birthday.
Where were you that night?
I got off work at 10 o'clock at night, and I walked over to the hard site, 1 Alpha. That's when they were bringing them in. They were handcuffed, and they had sandbags over their heads. At that point, they were still clothed. They were thrown in a pile. Then they were jumped on, but not like so many times that we would break a rib or whatnot. And there was stomping on hands and feet.
Can you tell me what was happening here when this picture was taken?
That's when they were, after they had been stripped and unhandcuffed, they were then placed in a pyramid pile by Grainer to, from what my understanding was, to put them in a one area, one spot, because there were so many prisoners. There were 7. So instead of having them stand together, holding hands or whatnot, he had them get down on hands and knees and make a pyramid.
Did you ever think that night, this is a bad thing to do? We shouldn't do this. I
thought it was odd, kind of weird, but it was kind of like, if everyone else is doing it, you know, you're doing it, kind of, you know, it's, if they thought it was wrong, then they would have stopped it. So therefore, it wasn't right, but apparently it wasn't uncommon enough to stop.
I think that was the most offensive picture to me.
Which one?
The pile of naked Iraqi prisoners, and Grainer and Lynndie England standing on the other side of it with their thumbs up. That was offensive. Because it looked like they were enjoying it.
Who was asking you to stand in this picture?
I think it was Sergeant Frederick.
Did he explain to you why it was good for you to stand there?
They wanted me to get in the picture, and I said no. And he said, oh, come on, just get in the picture, and point at him and embarrass him. So after persistence, I just sounded fine, just do it. And as you can see, I'm leaning in, so I leaned in and then quickly got away from him. It's not like I wanted to stand there all night by him like that.
Again, you are smiling on this picture.
He did ask me to smile, so I did smile.
What caused them to just abandon everything that they knew to be correct? That's what I wanted to know. What would make them do this? And how did they do this? Those kind of questions.
Did you think that they decided themselves to do this?
I never thought that they did this on their own.
How did the prisoners respond? What did they say?
To the pyramid, or... They didn't say anything. The only time they would talk is when we would ask them a question or whatnot.
Were they scared?
Probably. I mean, anybody would be scared, I'd have to say.
In January 2004, the Army began an investigation into Abu Ghraib. General Karpinski, who claimed she was unaware of the prisoner abuse, was informed about the pictures. Lynndie England was summoned for interrogation by the Army's Criminal Investigation Division. A storm was brewing, and there was no escape.
And I remember looking at my watch. It was at 2:19 a.m. in the morning. And I remember getting up and opening the door. And there was a bunch of guys, figures standing out there because it was dark. And First Sergeant said, this is CID. I kept trying to go through my head like CID, CID. I had no idea what that meant. So I was scared.
When I saw the pictures in living color, when you're not expecting to see anything like what you see, I just felt like, I really felt immediately like I was going to get sick. I felt like the walls of the office were closing in on me. I just could not conceive of what had taken place out there, not anything in these pictures.
They told me why I was being questioned for what I was suspected of.
Which was?
At the time, dereliction of duty, failure to obey a direct order, assault, maltreatment and cruelty, and I think conspiracy. And that was just all like a big shocker to me. It was like, what? Because in our mind, we're doing a job.
I never saw any information or any evidence of any kind of interrogation techniques or abuse or anything else.
Are you saying that there was a deliberate attempt to conceal what happened in this prison block from you?
And I believe that they did that because they knew if I got any wind of this, if I had even a hint or a piece of paper slipped to me or a comment by an Iraqi prisoner, I would have screamed loudly and immediately, and I would have put a stop to it. It would not have happened on my watch. And they knew that. They did not want the commander of the MP brigade to get information about what was going on.
How would you call it?
I'd call it a conspiracy.
General Karpinski claims that Lieutenant General Ricardo Sanchez, then the highest-ranking general in Iraq, knew of the prisoner abuse and maybe even ordered it.
This is clearly an isolated incident in the country, and this does not represent America's military.
And I believe that very early on they were aware of some of the interrogation practices that were being used with higher value detainees away from any of our facilities. There were some separate facilities that were not under my control.
Who was they?
They being General Sanchez, whoever needed to have that information.
Late in April 2004, the Abu Ghraib pictures hit TV screens worldwide. In Washington, the President and the Secretary of Defense said they were in shock, but they had already known for 3 months that prisoners had been abused in Abu Ghraib. Seymour Hersh of The New Yorker was one of the first journalists to report on the accused soldiers.
I believe they were told about sexual humiliation. And let me just ask you a question. Where is she from? West Virginia, Virginia? She worked at a menial job. She was a reservist. The unit she was in, a military police unit, was not a unit trained for prison act work. It was trained to be traffic cops. They were traffic cops, and they were suddenly sent to a prison, understaffed. And so you're going to tell me a group of reservists from West Virginia and Virginia, uneducated largely, unsophisticated, understood that the way to attack an Arab man, to deconstruct an Arab male, is to humiliate him sexually. They understood that. They knew that. They studied Arab culture in between, back home in West Virginia. I mean, if you tell me that, okay. But I don't believe that.
My husband came home from work, and the guys at work had told him, said, "We seen your daughter on the news, and she's in a scandal." And I had no idea what they were talking about. not any.
I didn't find out about it until the evening of the 29th, April 29th. I had called home, called my mom, just like normal. I called her every evening because she was worried. And she had told me that I was all over the news and the papers. I said, why? And she told me that it's about the prison and prison abuse.
It was just shocking. It was disturbing because I was just like, they can't be pictures of my sister.
The stuff in the night shift, Lynndie England's night shift, those kids in Abu Ghraib begin doing their crazy stuff in the end of September, early October. October, November, December, January. One of theirs, a kid, one of the kids from inside the unit goes into the police and shows the photographs. They start an investigation. Rumsfeld admits, after the stories become known, that by the end of January, he's been told, in the middle of January, and he's told the president right away about it. No looking at the pictures, but they know how bad it is. What do they do for the next 4 months? What do they do at the highest levels of my government until the stories become public? Nothing except prosecute 7 GIs.
After the story broke, the Pentagon announced a full investigation.
Again, as a result of the criminal investigation, 6 military personnel have been charged with criminal offenses. The coalition takes all reports of detainee abuse seriously, and all allegations of mistreatment are investigated.
Were Lynndie England and her fellow MPs instructed to abuse prisoners? During Senate hearings in May 2004, Secretary of Defense Rumsfeld had no answers.
These events occurred on my watch, As Secretary of Defense, I am accountable for them, and I take full responsibility.
Illegal mass detention.
We'll remain seated for a brief period.
Look at all the abuse in Iraq. You are a war criminal. Fire Rumsfeld.
What agency or private contractor was in charge of the interrogations? Did they have authority over the guards? And what were the instructions that they gave to the guards?
I'll walk through the chain of command and...
No, let's... You can submit the chain of command, please.
General Smith, do you want to respond?
No, Secretary Rumsfeld, in all due respect, you've got to answer this question, and it could be satisfied with a phone call. This is a pretty simple, straightforward question. What were the instructions to the guards? This goes to the heart of this matter.
It does indeed. As I understand it, there were two contractor organizations. They supplied interrogators and linguists. And I was advised by General Smith that there were maybe a total of 40.
Yes, sir. There were 37 interrogators that were...
I'm asking who was in charge of the interrogations.
So they were not in charge. They were interrogators.
My question is, who was in charge of the interrogations? Mr. Secretary, you can't answer these questions?
I can. I thought the purpose of the question was to try to make sure we got an accurate presentation, and we have the expert here who was in the chain of command.
I think these are fundamental questions to this issue.
Fine.
Lynndie England claims that the prison guards were instructed by privately contracted interrogators and military intelligence, MI.
We thought it was okay because MI was saying to do it, and they kept telling us we were doing a good job. Keep it up. I mean, I was actually there when MI had told Grainer that you guys are doing a great job, keep it up. And in my mind, even though we weren't there for the interrogations, when they were saying we're doing a good job and we're to keep it up, apparently they were getting some kind of information. So apparently it was working in our minds. So that's why we would keep it up.
Who gave the instructions, you think, now?
I believe that the contract interrogators gave the instructions. And I believe that the MI people were aware that those contractors were going to give those instructions.
Military intelligence?
Yes.
Sergeant Sam Provence worked for military intelligence in Abu Ghraib. In an exclusive interview with America's ABC News, he agreed that military intelligence ordered the abuse.
Anything that they were to do, legally or otherwise, they were to take those commands from those interrogators. One interrogator told me about how commonly the detainees were stripped naked, and in some cases wearing women's underwear.
Because of this interview, Sergeant Provence is now under investigation himself. He says the prosecutions are a cover-up.
There's definitely a cover-up, and that people are being either telling themselves or being told to be quiet. What I was surprised at was the silence, the collective silence by so many people that had to be involved.
The prisoner abuse issue is not limited to Abu Ghraib. Recently, many more cases have been documented in Iraq and in Afghanistan and Guantanamo Bay. These pictures, for example, show U.S. Marines torturing and abusing other prisoners in Iraq.
And a free Iraq will help make generations of Americans more secure. Our nation will always be grateful to Ambassador Jerry Bremer and his good work.
Paul Bremer was the interim governor of Iraq when the Abu Ghraib prison scandal broke.
I was appalled by the pictures, as I think all Americans were. It was a very difficult time, and I, among others, of course, formally apologized to the Iraqi people, both on television and in person.
We get every day almost reports, FBI reports, other reports, about more abuse in other prisons, in other countries, Guantanamo Bay, Iraq, Afghanistan. Are you surprised about that?
Yeah, I am. Surprised and disappointed. And I presume that the president's words will be followed. We will get to the bottom of it, and we'll find out who's responsible, and they'll be punished.
It's not an incident anymore, is it?
Well, I don't know. It certainly looks like there's a pattern, and that's really very disappointing.
So why was the president surprised about systematic prisoner abuse when it was he himself who decided that the Geneva Convention, which protects prisoners, did not apply to his wars in Afghanistan and Iraq?
The President of the United States made a determination in early 2002 that the Geneva Convention provisions did not apply to our conflict with Al-Qaeda.
Where did this start?
Oh, it started from the very beginning, from Afghanistan. There was a complete reluctance to obey the Geneva Convention. And we see it. It's been written in paper by the President and his lawyer then, Mr. Gonzalez, who's now going to be the Attorney General.
Good afternoon. I'm pleased to announce my nomination of Judge Al Gonzalez to be the Attorney General of the United States.
Gonzalez told the President that the Geneva Convention, you have the right to overrule it. It doesn't apply to you, Mr. President, because you're President. International law. It's an amazing statement. And so it started right away, and with the definition of what torture is, they redefined it. And so the attitude was very clear. These ragheads had, killed Americans, sent an airplane to bomb us. They're going to kill us, so everybody is guilty.
While in Abu Ghraib, Lynndie England fell pregnant. In October 2004, she gave birth to a son in North Carolina. The father, Specialist Charles Grainer, avoids any contact with Lynndie and the baby.
I don't really expect it because in his mind, he's focused on his case and I'm focused on my case. He has stated that he wishes he was here and he hopes that we're doing good and hopefully one day he will be here. So.
Do you still love him?
Yes, I do. And I do still believe that he does love me.
In January 2005, Grainer was sentenced to 10 years in prison. 6 other accused soldiers have admitted their guilt. Lynndie England is now living near the Fort Bragg base in North Carolina. Her Article 32 hearing will be held at Fort Hood, Texas. A court-martial may follow.
It's going to be a pretty good bet that 38 years is not the maximum. It's going to be lower, okay? And that makes a big difference.
Yes, what do you say about that?
Yeah, he likes that idea.
Rick Hernandez is Lynndie England's lawyer.
Even to this day, she does not believe that following orders was wrong. She believed that what she was doing was saving American lives. She believed that she needed to get these things so that Americans wouldn't die, so that they could get information to stop the mortar attacks, to stop the small arms fire, to stop the Iraqi police from bringing in weapons and giving it to the detainees.
You think you're taking the right road, and it ends up being the wrong one, so.
You're totally surprised about all that has happened to you?
Yes.
Yes, she's guilty. Yes, her colleagues are guilty of terrible misjudgment, of stupid actions. But are they ultimately responsible? No.
Mr. Secretary, thank you for your hospitality. And thank you for your leadership.
Shortly after the scandal broke, President Bush praised Secretary Rumsfeld. He still stands by him today.
I know how painful it is to see a small number dishonor the honorable cause in which so many are sacrificing.
Rumsfeld is going to go down in history as almost a caricature, a joke. It's not about just failing a little bit. It's about colossal failure. And it's just overwhelming failure. He set a new standard for failure and misrepresentation. The man is just amazing. He would have been a great lawyer, because he's the guy you would hire if you were caught with the gun in your hand still smoking.
In all, 9 soldiers have been charged over the Abu Ghraib scandal. General Karpinski has been suspended. The rest of the chain of command, officers, generals, Secretary of Defense Rumsfeld, and the President, have managed to avoid any responsibility.
Unless something interferes, that's how the history books will record this. that this was a scandal that was caused by 7, not only rogue, but reserve soldiers, led by a reserve female general officer. And something needs to come in and interfere with that report for history, because the truth is out there.
What will happen, do you think?
I don't know.
You think you will go to jail?
I could. I really couldn't say. I mean, I hope I don't. But, who knows? Only God knows, so.
I don't understand it. All those that know what happened and don't come out, with the truth, I mean, I don't understand it. I mean, they're doing nothing but lying to themselves. And it hurts to think that it's bad enough. Our government lies to us, and now our armed forces. Who do you believe? Of course, I'm going to believe my daughter before I believe anyone else.
I rarely cry, actually. I'm not the type of person that cries in front of people. So it would be unusual for me to cry.
And if you are alone?
Same thing. I'm a very self-conscious person, so yeah.
She's scared if she breaks down that she's going to look weak. And right now she's just trying to hold herself together just the same as I am. And I mean, there's times I want to break down, but I'm afraid if I break down, she'll break down, and we'll both fall to pieces, and that won't help her any.
Have you shed a tear?
Yes, I have. Many a tear. More tears than probably anyone could talk about.
This won't end with Lynndie England's going to jail. This is much bigger. And no matter how much we in the press fail to get it, and no matter how much cowardness there is in the Armed Services Committee, which is terrified of this issue and not pursuing it in the Senate, and no matter how much cowardness there is in the military, eventually it'll come out. It'll take time. It might not make that much of an impact when it comes out, but it'll come out that there's been systematic abuse of prisoners from the very beginning.
Can you see down the road what that means for you?
That means no life. I don't get to see my son become a man. It's the most important thing to me. I would like to see him being raised and be there with him.